I've been in dogs since 1991. We breed dogs that we want to train. I was out here in western Nebraska riding Harleys and training dogs. I don't sugarcoat anything, and if you don't like it, tough.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Flatlander Kennels podcast with Chris Jobman. My name is Elliott and I'm here with Chris today, and we're going to go through another step of his flowchart. How's it going today, Chris?
Hi, buddy. How are you, man? We're just living the dream here in western Nebraska.
Yep, as always, it's beautiful country out there. I'll tell you that. I'm no joke. The time I spent out there, and Elijah, my stepson out there, felt the same way. It's like a sportsman's paradise out there.
It is a very unique part of the world. There is everybody thinks, Nebraska's ugly. Well, if you drive across I-80 across Nebraska, you don't see anything. You get north of it, it is, especially the western part of Nebraska, it's beautiful.
I'm heading duck hunt in the Sandhills north of Ogallala in the middle, couple weeks, 2 weeks from now, actually.
Really?
Yeah, first time.
That's pretty up there, too. You'll like that. That's a bunch of big rolling hills with grass and marshy bottoms, and it's a cool part of the world, too.
Yeah, we've done a lot of in the past, sharptail hunting and pike fishing in the Sandhills, but it's always been a bucket list to duck hunt it, so...
Yeah, well, good luck. I hope you'll probably shoot a lot of little ducks up there. When are you going?
Second weekend of October, the 15th, 16th ish.
So I will be in the middle of the Grand. I hope you have a great time. I don't like you now right now.
Yep, I'm pumped up about it. So
yeah, well, good. Well, let's talk about our next evolution in our flow chart on teaching a dog to handle. So we've been through obedience, collar conditioning, force fetch, three-handed casting. We went to force to pile. We talked about front send to side send. Now let's talk about sit. I call it sit to pile, teaching a dog basically to sit to a whistle en route to the pile. We're still going to use the long lead, the long check cord on them, and that's how we're going to stop the dog. And we do a lot of whistle training on dogs, teaching the dog to sit like in obedience. You know, when you're walking the dog, you say sit, you blow the whistle, and eventually you get them to stop. And some people start teaching, and we like to do this as well, when the dog is coming back in force to pile, when the dog is coming back with the bumper, we like to have the dog trying to sit on its return. That's going to be a little bit confusing to the dog to teach him to sit to doing that. But there's this little goofy game that I play teaching a dog to sit to a whistle in the field. It's a funny little deal. Chris Aiken actually is the one that showed me this deal. You have the dog, and I don't know how it works. It just does. You get the dog, and you get a bumper in your hand, and you just kind of play fetch with the dog. With fun bumpers, and you just get the dog all excited, and you go, hey, and before you throw the bumper, you lift the bumper like over your head, and the dog is like right in front of you, and it looks up at the bumper, and you blow the sit whistle and say sit, and it ends up sitting. Then once it's sat, you throw the bumper to go to get, you don't have to be steady or nothing, you just throw the bumper, and you make it like a game. So then now you're going, hey, and you blow the sit whistle, and it sits, you throw the bumper, you kind of make it a game. And now then, so the dog kind of knows what the sit whistle is, but it really doesn't know what the sit whistle is in actual pile work form. So once you force your dog to a pile, when towards the end of that, you can start teaching the dog to sit to the whistle on its return. So now that it knows to sit, on the return. So now your dog is forced pile. You're getting ready. You're side sending the dog. Now you have a check cord on your dog. Make damn sure that check cord is not wrapped around your ankles. I've had it happen to everybody here, me included, multiple times. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to use the check cord to stop the dog. But what you're not going to do is you're not going to get the dog a 50, 60 yard or 50, 60 foot head start and blow the whistle and just grab and just like anchor yourself down and flip the dog over. Do not do that. You're going to hurt them. You're going to hurt your shoulders, your back, the dog's neck. You don't do that. And what you want to do is at this point in the stage of this, don't let the dog get a ton of steam. So you're going to say back. The dog is going to take off. And then you're just going to kind of gradually slow the rope down. You need to wear gloves when you do this. Just gradually slow it down if you can. And some of these dogs are really, really strong. You blow the sit whistle, you grab the rope, you stop it, you blow the sit whistle again. Now the dog's going to be like, what the heck is that? And they're going to spin around, and then now they're going to be sitting crooked a little bit, that sort of thing. This is a really good time, if they're sitting crooked, to pull a dog forward a little bit, bend down, like we talked about, bend down, pull the dog forward, straighten it up, and then blow a sit whistle again and stand up. So now the dog is square. Then you give the dog a left or right back. Make sure you keep doing that where, if you give a right back, the dog make sure the dog turns the right way. Just keep those standards high still. And then hopefully your dog is really well forced to a pile and you don't get into a popping problem. But what you want to do is, for like every, the good rule of thumb that I have is, for every one time you stop the dog, give it 2 free runs to the pile, so it doesn't start anticipating a whistle and popping. And then you're going to do the same thing again. You're going to kick the dog off, maybe let it get halfway, and you're not very far from the pile. You're only 20 yards from the pile. And you're going to kick the dog off, let it get halfway, blow the sit whistle, grab the rope, slow the dog down, make it stop, blow the sit whistle again, pull it towards you, stand it up, make sure it's sitting square, give it back to the pile. And you're just going to keep doing this over and over and over and over and over. Eventually, you want to get to the point where you blow a sit whistle and you start seeing the dog slow down. Once you start seeing that, you're getting through to what you want. Now, if you start seeing your dog popping or those sort of things in route, give it more free runs, and maybe on your free runs you force it. You may have to force just a little bit to let that dog understand that you don't want it to pop.
And for those of you that don't know, popping would just be sitting on its own.
Yeah, stopping,
yeah. Anticipating your whistle.
Anticipating the whistle, sitting on its own, looking at you. They're confused. Like, first you want me to go, now you want me to stop. What do you want me to do? They get confused on that whole situation.
And Chris, if they turn the wrong way, how do you handle that?
You have the rope. So if you give a left back, now what ends up happening is some of these dogs will get a little confused and a little bit nervous. So if you give a left back, but they turn to the right, then you have the rope. If they turn the wrong way, no, sit, tweet, sit, maybe blow whistle again, stop them again with the rope, straighten them up, and re-give the cast, and make sure that they turn the right way. Gotcha. You still want to keep that standard. You still want to do all of that. And what you want to do here is you want to start sitting this dog. I like to use a really long check cord, 50 to 75 feet long. And that way you can stop them multiple places en route to the pile. And you want to get to the point where when you kick them off, you want to get to the point where they sit really, really quick. They're not looping left or right. Now, if they only loop left or right a couple feet, that's not a big deal, because that's kind of how the dog turns. If they start looping, feet off the line, left or right, that's not good. That's when you need to tighten up your sit with that check cord and make them sit a lot quicker. And you got to straighten them up quick, because here, if you start with a loopy sit at this stage of their life, it is so hard to fix down the road. I can't even tell you how hard it is. So this is where you want the dog to sit really, really fast. And if you blow the whistle and they know what the sit whistle is, they know what it means. But when you blow that whistle, if they don't shut it down right away, you stop them with that rope immediately. They have to stop. With these big, hard charging dogs, get ready. They're gonna hurt. You're gonna pull on your shoulders, your back, the whole 9 yards. So you may have to slow them down, even more often. You may have to, before they get a big head of steam. But you want to get to the point where you can stop that dog 10 feet in front of you. In the middle, you want to be able to stop that dog 10 feet from the pile. And they sit immediately, turn around, square up to you, are attentive, and then you can cast them. So you want to shut them dogs down as much as you can, as quickly as you can, en route to the pile. Did you do it like this with George, or how did you do it?
Gosh, I was trying to think of. I did not do sit to pile like this.
No,
Honestly, I can't even remember. It wasn't like this, but I don't recall.
Yeah. I always tell people in my seminars, and this is, I'm going to use a swear word, but if you don't have sit, you don't have shit.
Yeah.
And this a big deal for me. I am a stickler on super fast whistle sits. I take pride in our dogs sitting to the whistle quick, because if you don't have a really good whistle sit, it's really, really hard to run a tight blind. We've talked about that, and it's extremely difficult, extremely. So that's how we do it. I mean, it's relatively simple. I mean, this podcast isn't going to be very long because it's a very simple step. But what I don't want you to do is don't rush it. Make sure the dog is sitting really, really, really fast and sitting square. You pull the lead, square them up the whole 9 yards. This is a quick podcast just because that is, and then our next podcast when we talk about in the flow chart will be like mini TNT. That's the next step after sit to pile. But this is a quick one, man.
Can you talk about the loopy sit and how that negatively affects the blinds and handling?
Yeah, I mean, if you have a loopy sit, like just say you're trying to run a blind between hay bales or any kind of cover, trees or anything like that, if your dog doesn't sit really fast and square, if they're looping left or right, it's almost impossible to run those type of blinds. Because when you blow the sit whistle, they loop behind a tree. It happens every time. And they loop behind a tree or they loop behind a hay bale. Excuse me. I'm going to sneeze. But they loop behind a hay bale left or right. And if you don't have a super fast whistle set, you can't run those really nice keyhole blinds or hug a hay bale or run behind the gun blind, because then if they blow the sit whistle, they loop to the right if they're out of sight. So, and then this sit to pile, it translates when we get into treading water and sitting in water when you're after your water forcing. A lot of that stuff translates right to that. So if you have a really good whistle sit, then it will translate right to your treading water and sitting in the water. It just goes hand in hand.
Right. I'd say that's one of the biggest things that you taught me this summer with Georgie out there working with you guys, is knowing when to hit that whistle to put her in position to make a good cast, a really good literal cast.
Yeah.
And so you set them right where you want them for anticipating your next cast. And with that loopy sit, it's so much harder to set them where you want them to anticipate that next cast.
Yeah, because you have, so let's just say you're running a blind and they get offline a little bit and you sit and you blow your sit whistle. And if they were to stop really quickly, you only need, let's just say you need a 20-degree cast. So, and it's really easy for a dog to give you a 20-degree cast, especially into the wind or that sort of thing. But if you have a loopy sit, your 20-degree cast ends up being a 45. And that's that's a much, much harder cast to give on a dog to really change the direction that much, especially with a really high rolling dog that likes to run and dig and go back. Those dogs are really hard to get that 45-degree cast because they're just rolling. But they'll give you a 20-degree cast. So if you have a really good sit whistle, and you keep your dog fairly tight to the line of the blind, then your casts are much easier. You're getting a 20-degree cast instead of a 45. And this is where it all starts. This is where it all starts, is right here. And it doesn't take real long to do. Now, there are some dogs, and I've had them in the past, where they just don't get it, man. They love to run to the pile. They've been forced really well. They just like to boogie and run and dig and go. Those dogs that are like that, you have to stop them dogs maybe multiple times en route. So let's just say you're 20 yards back or 30 yards back, however far off back you are, and you have a 50-foot check cord. And you kick them off, you may have to shut them down at 10 yards, right? And then now, just to get them under control, because they're hauling butt. So you shut them down at 10 yards and you give them a left back. And they take off. And then when they get to 20 yards, you shut them down again. Listen, you still have to stop. And then you don't give them a left back, you give them a right back, the opposite cast. And you may have to do those to those dogs that run really, really hard. You may have to shut them down multiple times. And if that's the case, then you're probably going to need a much longer check cord because you're going to have to shut them down multiple times en route to your pile. And what I should have said at the beginning of this deal is your pile that you're doing sit to pile is the same back pile that you did at 3-inch casting, your same back pile you did at force to pile. So it's the same location, same pile. They've been there 100 times. They know the gig. So those really, really hard charging dogs, you need to stop them multiple times probably. But I can't stress it enough. For every one time you stop them, they need to get 2 or 3 good, easy, free sends so they don't start the popping. Like it's okay if you only stop them a few times in your session and you give them more free runs. That's fine. I would much rather have them understand that if they don't hear a whistle, they keep running, then start the popping. Now you have to go back to forcing. So watch your balance in there.
Right.
So
but we did have a question, I think that you had.
Oh yeah, let's do a question. So if anybody's got a question on sit to pile, let me know. I know that was really quick, but it's pretty simple. It's very, very straightforward. Let me get to this question. Let me. I'm on the Facebook page. Let me dig it out of here.
And while he's getting to that question, remember, come and join us on the Facebook group, Flatlander Kennels Podcast with Chris Jobman. We have a lot of comments going on over there, and that's where we get our questions from. We love doing Q&As because we want to be here to answer questions that you have, clarification. So we keep a master list of all the questions. So come on over to the Facebook group, post up your questions there. It'll go into a Word document, and we will get to them because we do these Q&A sessions frequently.
Absolutely. I'm still looking. But, yeah, go to the Facebook page and do that. Let's see here. It's right here somewhere. I just had it. I am not the most organized person in the whole wide world.
It's okay. I'll just mark the clip, so just take your time.
Okay. I like that comment on here by Stormy Crook that our force fetching is really helping him.
Yeah, he is a follower of my YouTube channel and podcast, and he contacts me quite a bit, and he's kind of come through that, and he's just eating the content up. He actually went through and wrote the flowchart down for himself and has listened to the episodes multiple times. He's really into it.
Good. Let's see here. All right. Yeah, I got it. All right. Let's do this question on the Facebook page from Jenny Bricker. It came on August 29th. She says, my dog is taking a straight line to her watermarks. She starts to come back in a straight line, but will cheat halfway back by cutting to the shore. I would also like to hear your thoughts on an e-collar corrections in the water. I have been told by some people never to make e-collar corrections in the water. Well, Jenny, that's actually pretty good. First, let's do the first thing on your dog's coming back and it runs out and tries to cheat. First of all, your dog needed to be through swim by. It needs to understand how to handle on a return. We also do a thing called de-cheat, which we'll get into in a few podcasts down the road. But your dog will need to be on through water force, water tee, sitting in the water, and a full swim by program. And when that dog starts to cheat coming back, you'll stop that dog, cast it back into the water, and call it back to you. And you won't be able to do that unless your dog understands how to handle on a return. The dog has to be able to handle on a return. So a full swim by program. I know some pros don't use swim by. I know a very, very good friend of mine does not do swim by, but their dogs do handle on a return, and they do de-cheat. So whether you do swim by or not, it's however you want to do it. I know like I said, some very successful pros don't do it. And you can argue with them all you want, but they're very successful.
How do the dogs know how to handle on the return without swim by? Is there something else they do in the place?
They handle on the return on land. On land, they understand it, and they just make them handle on a return. Their dogs just don't understand how to handle on a return. And they also do de-cheat with their dogs too, which we'll get into in a few podcasts down the Flowchart. But they just know how to handle. They stop, and I've seen it for a bazillion years, and they just understand how to handle coming back. They just handle when he makes those dogs handle, they just handle. But I think with swim by, if you teach your dog a really, really good swim by, I think they understand that a lot easier. And the fixing of this little problem is not a big deal. They understand it. And now there is just some dogs out there that they just fight you every second of the way. They want to get out of the water on the way back. They want to get out early. You have to be very, very vigilant to keep that dog in the water and make sure that it understands that. Now, so a full swim by program, you need to be able to do that. Second part of her question is about giving e-collar corrections in the water. I've heard this for years and years and years. And when I first started years ago, I was the same way. Like I heard that, don't ever give your dog correction in the water. That's all BS. That is absolute BS. Dogs should not, if you've done a proper collar conditioning program, you're working through all your force stuff, and the dog understands. Because how are you going to, if your dog doesn't sit to a whistle in the water, how do you stop it? Like you have to be able to have a correction. So unless your dog has to understand one thing very, very clear in the dog's head, that a disobedient command is followed by collar pressure, a slow sit, cheating the water, a cast refusal, indirect pressure. They have to understand those concepts, right? So that when you do give that dog a correction in the water, it understands why it's getting correction. It's not in his mind or her mind thinking the water is doing it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So your dog has to understand that first. But don't be afraid to give your dog a color correction in the water. If it's trying to get out, I'm a big believer on, I don't like to make areas hot, right? I know some trainers out there, if the dog is swimming, you're trying to do it down the shore water blind. That's, for instance, you're doing it down the shore water blind, which is my favorite water blind to run. If you can run a down the shore water blind, you can run almost any water blind in the world. So you run a down the shore water blind, and your dog is, let's just say it's an easier one. You're 10 yards from the water, from the edge of the land. And the second you see your dog, this is my philosophy. The second you see your dog turn its head and commit to the land, it's made a decision to get out. The second that dog has made a decision to get out, that's when you stop the dog and you put it back online. Okay? A lot of trainers out there will let that dog swim to the bank, let it get out, and then light it up on the bank to teach that dog, you never get out of the water. That land's bad, water's good. In my mind, that is absolutely not the way to do it. Because what ends up happening is you are making areas hot. You're making the land hot. You're not teaching the dog how to think. So when the dog turns its head to get out, that's when you stop the dog. You give it a light collar correction in the water, and then you handle your dog back online. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that showed up in one of the videos we put on YouTube where I can't remember which dog it was, but you said that exact thing. The dog looked to the land, you gave a correction, and the next time, I think it might have been Ruger.
It was Ruger. I remember the day.
The next time the dog did it perfect.
And he actually looked to the land. He's like, no. And I said, well, so I changed the dog's way of thinking and its thought process. Instead of a dog being scared of the land, it changed his complete thought process and decision making to make the right decision. He's making decisions because of that. This could be a whole nother podcast on how to teach a thinking dog. But it made a decision to do the right thing out of education, not fear.
Right.
Completely different monster. And unless you are going to use, right, your collar corrections in the water, so what are you going to do? Let it get out and then make it land hot? So then now your dog doesn't want to get out anywhere. It's scared to death to even get out, and you can't even run it down the shore water blind. It's a really, really tight one, 5 feet off the edge, because the dog is just going to go straight out in the middle of the water because it's scared to death of the land. So unless you're willing, and then what are you going to do if a dog, you blow a sit whistle in the water and the dog doesn't stop? You just give up and let it swim across the water? No, that's what the collar is for. You can give, I do it all the time. You give collar corrections in the water, but your dog has to understand why it's getting a correction. And I don't think water, you see, all them things, you add water, electricity, and, everybody's getting electrocuted and blah, 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 blah. I'm not sure, and I've never, I can't tell you if it's right or not, but I don't think let's just say your collar's on a 2, I don't think if you give a dog a collar correction on a 2, the water makes it a 6.
Right.
I don't know if it amps it up that much. I don't think it does. Because if that was the case, every time I nicked a dog in the water on a 1 or a 2, if it goes up to a 6, they'd be screaming bloody murder. Mm-hmm. And they don't. They don't. So I don't think amping that up, the water amps that up anymore. I think, but what I do know is I think the dog has to understand why it's getting corrected, so it doesn't associate the water like, oh, the water is doing it to me. No, it's your decision-making process and your lack of obedience is why you're getting corrected.
Right.
Because you have to be able to stop the dog in the water. You have to be able to correct the dog in the water. You have to be able to do that. And I think that's an old wives' tale. That's an old way of thinking about not using the collar in the water. Mm-hmm. So I think, like I said, the dog has to understand why it's being corrected. That's a major thing. I don't know if I explained that correctly or not, but
I think so.
We could do a whole podcast on my philosophy on how to teach a thinking dog and how to correct a thinking dog and build a dog that thinks and loves to do what it's doing and its decision-making process, rather than a dog running scared and not making terrible decisions.
Yeah, I think we should.
I'll tell you, it could be. It's a different way of thinking, and it's really good in person. And I like to do it that way. I mean, you were out here and you saw me do all that.
I did. One thing that you're so good at that I think you take for granted is teaching people to read dogs' body languages. I think it's a skill that you naturally have, and so you don't think about that as much. But that's one thing that I have picked up in being around you is just like watching more of the body language, watching the head, just focusing in on that. I think for you, you've been doing it so long, it comes so naturally. But I think for guys like amateurs, guys like me, where it's like, oh, you actually need to really be paying. It's not just what is the dog doing? Oh, the dog's on land. Use the collar. It's actually learning the body language of your dog. Oh, look, I see where it's looking. I know what it's thinking, and like purposefully, for those of us that aren't as accustomed to that, purposefully trying to be aware of learning your dog's body language. So when that dog looks over, you know what it's planning to do and you can correct it there. If you can't read what your dog's planning to do, you can't make that correction.
Correct. And a lot of people, they just stand up there and watch their dog run or swim. They're not, they're just standing up there. They're just standing like, okay, he's almost there. There was a question on our Facebook page, and I can't find it right now, talking about a dog's lead. And let's just talk about it real quick.
Right.
This would be a good time to do that. And I've been saying this for years and years and years. I finally heard somebody else say something about a dog's lead. I think it was Dennis Vogt. I can't remember who it was, but that's the first person I've ever heard talking about a dog's lead. And when I usually bring it up, even to other trainers, they look at me like I got 10 heads. They have no idea. They're like, what are you talking about?
Well, that expression.
Yeah. So I came from the horse world, right? When I was a little kid, my mom made me do 4-H, and I had horses, and we had a whole bunch of the damn things. You couldn't get me on one right now if you tried. But I learned a lot about animals and leads and to follow that. And it was years and years and years ago where I started noticing leads. And what I mean by that is let's just say a horse is running in a circle. So if they're running, let's just say they're running counterclockwise in a circle. When they do that, they're going to be in the left lead. That means their left leg is going to be reaching out farther than their right leg. Because if it was the other way around, they're going they're going counterclockwise, remember? If they're in the right lead, that means they would tip over, basically. That right leg is reaching out farther, and they're not going to be able to hold their line going in circles. And I learned this from reining. I did the reining.
Allows them to turn, right?
Allows them to turn and stay and keep their balance. And I learned this in reining. When you ran a counterclockwise circle, you had to be in the left lead. When you switched to a clockwise circle, you had to, the horse had to switch to its right lead. So that keeps that will tell you where they're going. If you watch a dog run from behind, and they're running let's just say you're running a blind, and you're running a big crosswind blind, left to right to left crosswind blind. So you take off and you see that dog fighting that factor. And you see that dog, its body's tilted a little bit, its head's looking to the right, and you see it fighting the wind, and it's not fading to the left. It's just running a nice straight line, or maybe even a little bit moving to the right. It's fighting that wind. That dog is in the right lead. That dog's right leg is reaching out farther. Right front leg is reaching out farther. It's leaning into that wind. It's fighting that wind. The second you see that body change, like you're looking at the shoulders, basically, the second you see that body change, like just say it starts fading with the wind now, it starts fading, that dog has give up fighting that factor. Now that dog is in the left lead and it's heading left. It's fading with the wind. So if you're a handler and you're running a blind retrieve and you've got some nasty crosswinds or you got a lot of stuff going on, the second you see that dog switch leads to not fight the factor, that's when you blow the whistle and you get involved, because that dog is telling you it's giving up on the factor.
And people watching are like, what the hell did he blow the whistle for?
Exactly right. You're online. No. It's about to get really ugly because it switch leads and it's going to fade with the wind. I won't be able to get it back up into the wind. Mm-hmm. So the second you see that dog has switched leads, and this is what I'm talking about, decision making. That dog has switched leads. It has made the decision to no longer fight that factor. The second you see it make that decision to no longer fight that factor, you get involved and you change this dog's mind, put that dog back on line into the wind. Instead of letting it fade 10, 15, 20 yards left into the wind with the wind, now you're never going to get that damn dog back. Right? Especially if you have a left turning dog that turns left, and you're never going to get that dog back. Mm-hmm. So the second you see it give into the factor, that's when you get involved, put it back online, and that's how you change a dog's mind, how to teach it to think.
Right.
Okay? It happens with everything. When that dog is running, it will tell you where it's going. The second it changes leads, you need to be paying attention to that. And there's some dogs, especially some of our young dogs, that will run a mark, a crosswind mark, and it's so funny to watch. It's not funny, but it is. They literally change leads 10 or 15 times on the way to the mark. And you can see when they run, they don't run dead straight. They're kind of like you're kind of like looping through there. They're kind of like wiggly going up and through there. They keep changing leads because they know they're supposed to fight the factor, but they want to give in. They want to fight the fight, and they can't make up their mind. I see it all the time. And those are the young dogs that can't make up their mind. Mm-hmm. If you're wanting to teach, like I said, on a mark, like you're running a mark and you want to work on crosswind marks. So the wind's blowing right to left, but you're throwing the mark left to right into the wind. And you're trying to teach these dogs to hold that line, to fight that wind, to stay on the right side of the gun. We do a lot of we have the gunner step out, push the dog out there to try not to break their momentum. But if you have a dog that when you do that just is not getting it, they're not getting it, and they don't do it themselves, the second you see that dog should be in the right lead. If the dog is fighting the wind, it's in the right lead. The second you see that dog go to the left lead, that means it's going to give into the wind and backside the gun. So the second you see that, you blow the whistle, you get involved, you put it back on line to teach it the right line to stay on the right side of that wind. That's how you teach a thinking dog, is when they make up their mind, their decision to not fight the factor, that's when you get involved. And it may take no pressure at all. It may take a little light nick, get them back up in there. But if you're one of those trainers, like I was talking about on the down the shore water blind, when they get out, you light them up. Some of these trainers, I'll know, I watch them run, and or amateurs, they let the dog get way downwind. I'm like, you were 15 yards late. They're like, what? I said, that dog made up its mind 15 yards ago. And now you've got to stop that dog and give it a huge cast back up in the wind. And now you're in a cast refusal fight because it won't cast in the wind. And now you've lit that dog up way on the left-hand side. And now that dog is, that area is hot. Let's just say the area kind of is hot a little bit. And now you want to rerun that mark, teach it like it's a cheating single. Now you rerun that mark. So if that mark's thrown at 12 o'clock, they run at 2 o'clock because they're trying to stay away from that hot spot that you've created because you didn't understand what you were looking at. That's why I like to watch the dogs lead, and they will tell you where they're going. I don't know if that's the easiest way to explain it or not, but it's really hard to see when a dog is running unless you know what you're looking for. It's really, really hard to see.
You're really looking for the shoulders, right?
You're looking for the withers. Yeah, their withers, their shoulders, and they'll kind of lean. There's that, what dog tracking they call it, or however they say, and they will. A lot of dogs, some of the dogs run straight, some of them have a little bit crooked, but they will show you which lead they're in if you're paying attention. And I'm teaching my ladies that. It's funny. The ladies of FLK, a bunch of them are coming tomorrow. This is our last week of that, but you should see them now. They're all talking about it. Oh, I changed its lead. You should hear them all talk about it. It's right. The craziest thing, and it's fun. And I'm more of the trainers that I train with are seeing it now too. But that's something I accidentally came across it. It was years and years ago, and I was watching dog. I'm like, that dog's in the right lead, and it just, for some reason, it just popped in my head, and I've been using it ever since. And it's really helped me. Especially at last year's Master National. We went 24-28 at Master National last year. And in the National last year, they really wanted tight blinds last year. That was their big deal last year, was really, really tight blinds. And I think a lot of our dogs' success at the Master National last year, well, they marked really well, for one. And for two, I ran my blinds extremely tight because every time I saw them change a lead and make up their mind not to stay online, I put them back online. I did it consistently with those 28 dogs, and I think that really helped us last year. And I was hyper focused on, because that's what they were. That's after the first series, we knew what they were looking for. So I was really hyper focused on that, and I really now in my training I am too. I try to keep a really, really tight line. I'm hyper focused on leads. And looking at that sort of thing. I don't know if I explained it all right, Elliott, or not.
Yeah,
but
I think so. That's good stuff. I think for those of us that's new, it's just a matter of watching for it. And it's something I'd kind of forgotten about since I had been out there. And so, like, when I'm at my training groups, or when those of you listening to your training groups and you're watching dogs, that's a good time to just think about it and watch for it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you can learn. I'm going to tell you, you can learn a lot about dog training by just watching and not sitting on Facebook under the tent and high-fiving everybody. And to truly watch a bunch of dogs run and in your mind, and I always tell people to try to do this. And when I help them train, I do the same thing. I'll get my whistle out. I'll stand by him or stand behind him or whatever. And I'm like, you blow the whistle when you think you need to, and I'll blow the whistle when I think you need to, and try to keep up. And they're like, man, that was fast. I'm like, that's because it changed his mind. He's like, I didn't even see it. And then I blow the whistle again. That was fun. I didn't even see it. And eventually, I like to, my assistants and some of the amateurs I help and we train with, I can sit in the gallery right now and I'll bet whistle. It'll be tweet. And then, it's crazy because they've learned how to read some of those things. I can call to this day when they're going to blow the whistle. I can tell you when it's going to happen because I've harped on them so much about being late. I'd rather see you be quicker on the whistle than later on the whistle, for sure.
Would you agree that blinds are as much when to blow the whistle as they are how the dog handles?
Timing is everything.
Right.
Timing is everything. You have to have a nice handling dog that understands how to fight factors and cast. But like I said earlier, if you can stop the dog and get a 20-degree cast, that's a much better deal than waiting too long, and now you need a 45 or 50-degree cast. That cast is so much harder to get than a 20-degree cast, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's all about timing and how fast your dog sits. And like the ladies are coming tomorrow and the next day, and I'll ask them, I'll be like, okay, Dorothy, which way does your dog turn? She's like, I don't. Like you have one dog, you should know this.
Right.
Like you guys, you should be able to just bam, bam. And then when I run the Grands and the National, it's hard to keep track of 30 dogs. So I have it in my notes in my phone. I'll have, I'll have Maverick Hassel, okay, and I'll have little bit notes in there. Turns to the right. Mm-hmm. Pearl in the right lead will turn to the right. In the left lead will turn to the left. Mm-hmm. Like I have that on all those dogs because some dogs will do that. You get those two-way turning dogs, turn to the left, turn to the right. Most of those dogs that are dual turners will, if they're like, I know some of them on my trailer, if they're in the right lead, they're going to turn to the right. Mm-hmm. If they're in the left lead, they're going to turn to the left. So you need, as a handler and a trainer, you need to know which lead they're in at almost all times to run a really, really good blind. Because if you set them up, if you think, okay, they're going to turn to the right here. So you set them up for the right turn. So that means you're kind of a little bit on the left side of the blind. And then they turn to the left. Like, oh, man, now you're out of whack. Yeah. But they'll tell you which way they're going to turn by which lead they're in a lot of times.
There's a game to it for sure, isn't there?
Oh, there's a lot to it. But if you're paying attention, some people just stand up there and watch the dog run, and they're dumbfounded by what the dog did. And I can't believe the dog did that. It was going to tell you it did that. You didn't even see it. Yeah. So. Of
course, working with thousands of dogs helps that.
That's from years and years of. Yeah. But here's the thing. I know a lot of pros and amateurs out there that have trained a pile of dogs. When I talk about leads, and they, like I said, they think I have 10 heads. Yeah. Until they realize what I tell them, and they're like, "Oh yeah." And so it's not about just training lots of dogs. It's about really paying attention to what's going on, and being involved, being in the moment. Being involved, watching the dog instead of just standing up there going through the motions and hoping the day gets over. Mm-hmm. So that's the whole deal.
Thinking dog, thinking trainer.
That's all I got, Elliott.
Well, I think that was great. Good information.
Yep.
Good stuff, guys. Come on over and join us at the Facebook group like we were mentioning earlier. Give feedback, questions about anything that you've heard. Check out the YouTube channel. A lot of the stuff that he's talking about tonight, there are videos of.
Yep.
I know there's one specifically about the lead and all that. So check that out on YouTube as well.
Okay, great. That was a good one. All right, guys. Yep. Get on the Facebook page, ask a bunch of questions. I think we've answered most of our questions. So we want a bunch of new ones on there. So if your question is redundant we've answered it multiple times on some of the podcasts, we won't probably answer those. You need to go back and listen to the podcast. But let's get some new ones on there, and so I can answer some questions, but we'll go from there.
All right.
All right, guys. Thank you for everything. We'll see you at the line. Take that in.
Gotta strike this chord with the humble hearts, bearing heavy chains and blue collar scars.